I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where I'd have to justify my choices, even to myself. You know that feeling? You build your life, you think you've got everything under control, you believe your decisions are the right ones, and then suddenly it all falls apart. People start calling you a monster. But am I really the one to blame? Tell me, how can anyone expect a man to be a father to a child that isn't even his? My name is Michael, and this story is about me. It all began the moment I realized my life had turned into a never-ending stream of accusations and blame. I divorced my wife, and from that day on, everything spiraled downhill. Not because I wanted to destroy my family. No, I was just tired of living in constant tension, in a house where every day felt like I was playing a role no one appreciated. I wasn't a bad husband, I really tried to be a good one. But society decided I was a bad person simply because I refused to financially support my ex-wife's daughter from her first marriage. Sounds harsh? Maybe. But is it fair? Why should I carry obligations that aren't legally, or biologically, mine? I keep asking myself the same question. Where's the line between kindness and naivety? When you support someone else's child, a child that isn't yours, does that make you noble or just a fool? And when you stop doing it after a divorce, suddenly you're branded a traitor. I look at this and wonder, is the problem really me? Or do people just love to judge without knowing the full story? Have you ever felt like you were being used? Not in an obvious way, but little by little, step by step. That's how it was for me. I worked hard, I paid the bills, I covered the debts, the vacations, the school, the activities. But once people start looking at you as if it's your duty, it crushes you. So after the divorce, for the first time, I said, no. Not because I couldn't afford it. I could. But tell me, was I supposed to keep paying for the life of someone I had no legal or blood responsibility for? I wanted freedom, a chance to finally breathe. But you know what? That freedom turned into a curse. People judged me. My ex-wife told everyone I abandoned her daughter. Relatives whispered behind my back. Neighbors thought I'd lost my mind. Co-workers hinted I was heartless. But no one ever asked me what it felt like to live for years with the constant weight of being taken for granted. I tried to explain I wasn't obligated. But all I heard was, what about the girl? She's used to your support. Yeah, she was. But should I have to sacrifice my own life just because someone else got used to it? Sometimes at night I sit and wonder, maybe they're right. Maybe I really am the villain. Maybe I should have handled it differently. But then I remember how I worked myself into the ground, how I put aside my own dreams just so the house was always taken care of. And I ask myself one more thing. Why does no one ever stop to think that men are human too? We get tired. We have the right to say, enough. This story is about how one decision flipped everything upside down. I lost not just my family, but also people's respect. And maybe, just maybe, I lost a part of myself. But back then, in that moment, I truly believed I was doing the right thing. So as you listen to my story, don't rush to judge. Try to imagine being in my place. Be honest with yourself. Would you keep supporting someone else's child after a divorce? Or would you finally choose yourself? I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in a small town called Naperville, where everybody knows each other by name. When I was 23, I got a job at the local Home Depot, and in the evenings I delivered pizzas for Domino's. Life felt steady, predictable. You know, the classic small-town American youth. Friday night baseball games at the park, Starbucks coffee to go from the corner shop, and endless talks about the future while sitting on the hood of a car in the Walmart parking lot. That's when I met Emily. She was a little older than me, and she had a daughter from her first marriage, Hannah. We met by chance. I was standing in line at Dunkin' Donuts, and she was trying to calm Hannah down after she dropped her donut on the floor. We started talking. First about coffee. Then about music. Then about how hard it is to raise a child alone these days. You ever have one of those moments when you meet someone, and suddenly, they become the center of your whole universe? That's what it was like for me. I didn't care that she had a kid. Honestly, my thought was, so what? That's not a deal breaker. I was young, in love, and I thought love could solve anything. We started dating. At first, it was simple. Movies at the AMC theater, walks along the Chicago River, late-night Target runs for groceries, as if we were already a family. And at some point, I stopped seeing Hannah as her daughter. She just became part of the picture. But here's my question to you guys. Have you ever taken on a role you weren't ready for? Tried to be something like a dad to a kid, even though deep inside part of you resisted because you knew you weren't their real father? Back then I didn't see it. I just wanted to be with Emily. A year later we got married. The wedding was small in her parents' backyard in Indianapolis. No big show, Just barbecue, string lights, and a local radio DJ spinning songs. We danced to an old Bon Jovi track, while Hannah ran around in a little white dress, laughing. Everyone kept telling me, "You're her real dad now." And that's when something inside me shifted. I smiled, but in my head I asked myself, what if Emily and I have kids of our own someday? Would Hannah ever feel the same to me as they would? I pushed the thought away, because even having it made me feel like a terrible person. The first years of marriage were ordinary. Mortgage on a small house, a Wells Fargo account, work, and the occasional summer trip to Lake Michigan. But as time went on, the feeling grew stronger. I was stuck in a role that didn't belong to me. I'd come home exhausted, and Hannah would run up saying, "Hi, Dad." And every time, something inside me cracked, because I wasn't her dad. And then came the moment that changed everything. One evening when Hannah was about 8, we all went to Walmart for school supplies. She grabbed my hand and said, "You know, Dad, I've never met my real father. But I don't need to. Because I have you." And in that instant I didn't feel joy. I felt fear. Fear, because I realized I never wanted to be her replacement. So tell me honestly, does that make me selfish? Or is it normal to admit you're not ready to live someone else's life? That thought stayed with me. I loved Emily. But inside, that feeling of being out of place kept growing stronger. Every single day after the divorce, I could feel the tension inside me growing, like a quiet fire slowly turning into a raging blaze. My job at an IT company in Austin, Texas, which once gave me a sense of purpose, now felt like torture. Every project, every deadline, it all weighed me down. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was about carrying the responsibility for someone else's life, a girl who wasn't even mine. When I came home to my empty apartment on South Congress Avenue, the silence was deafening. And in that silence, the only voice I could hear was my conscience. I'd sit on the couch, head in my hands, asking myself, why doesn't anyone understand that I'm human too? Why does everyone expect me to keep carrying this weight? And here's the strange part. Every time I thought I had finally decided to cut ties, a voice inside me whispered, making me doubt again. I remembered every toy run at Walmart, every ice cream at Dairy Queen, every Sunday trip to Houston to visit Hannah's grandmother. All those moments, they used to be my life. And now they felt like they belonged to someone else. So let me ask you, viewers, have you ever felt like you made the right choice, but the whole world judged you for it? How do you hold on to that choice when your soul is being torn in two? Sometimes I tried to drown those thoughts in coffee at Starbucks on Congress Avenue. I'd order a latte, sit by the window, and watch families walk by with their kids. I'd see their laughter, the way they held hands, and it hit me, I had lost something precious. The little details from the past turned into knives. Emily asking me to pick bread at Walmart. Arguing about the color of Hannah's wallpaper. Silly things. But now, those moments were reminders of a life I lived in someone else's role. And every time I told myself, that's not my responsibility anymore, my heart tightened. Then one day I got a message from Hannah. Why don't you visit me? I made a drawing for you. I stared at the screen, frozen. A wave of guilt and anger washed over me. My eyes burned with tears, but I couldn't type. I couldn't call. And I thought to myself, if anyone ever asked my advice, I'd tell them, never let a child call you Dad if you're not ready to carry that weight forever. Because once you do, you can't take it back. Morning started with guilt. Driving down South Lamar Boulevard with my coffee, passing schools filled with kids, I felt the sting of being on the outside. They were growing. And I was left behind. One afternoon, Emily called me at work. She asked me to help pay for Hannah's summer camp. I looked at my phone, knowing I could spend hours explaining why I couldn't do it, but it wouldn't matter. My resolve was colliding with reality. A child who once saw me as her father, she'd always be part of my life, even if I tried to erase her from it. Later that evening, I sat on a bench by Lady Bird Lake, staring at my reflection in the water. And what I saw wasn't strength. It was weakness. My inability to say no without consequences. And in that moment I asked myself again, what does it mean to be a good man if your choices end up hurting the ones you used to love? Day by day the tension kept building. And inside me the truth was becoming clear. This wasn't just a conflict anymore. It was turning into a war. A war between my principles and someone else's love that I could never fully return. Every single day after the divorce felt like a trial. I'd wake up with a weight on my chest, like invisible hands squeezing my heart, and I'd go to sleep with the same heaviness that never let me go. My life became an endless maze of questions and doubts. What's right? What's wrong? What do I owe and what don't I? I'd sit on the couch in my small apartment on South Congress Avenue in Austin and realize everything I'd gone through up until now was just a warm-up for this day. The day that changed everything. Not long after the divorce, Emily called me. Her voice was shaky, almost breaking. And in that moment, I knew she was about to ask for something that would turn my world upside down. She told me I had to keep supporting Hannah. Financially. Instantly, my chest tightened. I stared at the screen, unable to speak. The words I wanted to say fought inside me, clawing to get out, but they never made it past my lips. I remembered the first time Hannah looked up at me and quietly said, "Hi, Michael." I remembered the trust in her eyes, the love I never truly deserved because I wasn't her real father. And now, years later, that very trust had become the heaviest burden of my life. That night I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling. Memories flooded my mind: Walmart toy runs, Dairy Queen ice cream, Thanksgiving trips to Houston. I saw Hannah's joy, her trust. And I knew, if I said no, I'd betray all of it. So let me ask you, viewers, have you ever faced a choice where no matter what you do, someone gets hurt, and the only alternative is betraying your own principles? I told myself I had help because we were a family. But now, we weren't a family anymore. Did that mean I had to stop caring about someone who had grown used to my support? The next few days were torture. Driving through Austin, passing the Starbucks on South Lamar where we used to grab lattes for everyone. Walking past Walmart, watching kids run between the aisles. Every little thing reminded me of a past I couldn't bring back. I tried telling myself money is just a tool, that love isn't an obligation. But deep inside, a storm was raging. Every dollar I gave, or didn't give, every minute with her or away from her became a moral burden I couldn't escape. Then came a message from Hannah. "Why don't you visit me? I made a drawing for you." I froze. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would tear through my chest. Sitting in silence at my kitchen table, phone in hand, I realized no words could undo what had already been broken. And I thought, if you ever find yourself in my shoes, never let a child call you Dad unless you're ready to carry that title forever. Because once they do, no law and no divorce papers can erase that bond. Every morning began with guilt. And I knew I could lose respect, be called cold, greedy, heartless. But if I kept going, I'd lose myself. Then, a couple of weeks later, a handwritten letter arrived. "Dear Michael, why did you leave? I thought you'd always be my dad." Reading those words crushed me. No money, no child support, nothing could ever replace what we had destroyed with the divorce. And in that moment, all the logic in the world didn't matter. Right or wrong, none of it mattered anymore. That night was the longest of my life. Lying awake, remembering every time I held her hand, helped with her homework, laughed with her. Memories played like an old movie I couldn't turn off. And I realized the conflict had reached its peak. My life had become a choice between taking on someone else's responsibility forever, or walking away, knowing it would change everything. And finally, for the first time, I told myself the truth: I can't be everything to everyone. I have to choose myself. If you ever face that choice, remember, sometimes the right decision doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you human. And being human means living with the consequences. I knew the road ahead would be long, filled with guilt, doubt, and memories. But at least now I was honest. Honest that I could no longer turn back. It's been 6 months since the day I told myself, I can't be everything for everyone anymore. 6 months of silence. 6 months that felt like time itself slowed down. My life in Austin turned into a routine. Working at an IT company on Guadalupe Street, grabbing my morning coffee at Starbucks, the occasional hangout with friends at Barton Springs. But everything felt empty. I hadn't seen Hannah. Not a single call. Not a single message. The only thing I had left was that handwritten letter she sent right after the divorce. Sometimes on Facebook or Instagram I'd stumble upon her photos, new friends, a new haircut, her face more grown up. Every picture reminded me of myself, yet also reminded me that I was no longer a part of her life. One evening I stopped by Walmart on South Lamar Boulevard for groceries. And there she was, Hannah, standing in line with her grandma holding a bag of fruit. She noticed me. For a second her eyes lit up, and then she looked away. My chest tightened so hard I thought I couldn't breathe. I wanted to walk over, to say something, to hold her hand like I used to, but my legs were frozen. I walked out to the parking lot, sat in my car, and just stared at the steering wheel. One thought kept repeating in my head: I turned her into a stranger. That scene replayed in my mind over and over. Every time I passed by that Walmart or the Starbucks on South Congress, I thought of her. I realized I had lost something much bigger than being part of a child's life. I had lost trust. I had lost a bond that could never truly be rebuilt. Every morning I tried to drown myself in work. Programming, client calls, reports, it helped, but only halfway. By evening, I'd return to my empty apartment on South Lamar, and the silence hit me harder than ever. And here's what I realized. Money, child support, legal obligations, they mean nothing compared to what you lose when you stop being part of someone's life. That feeling can't be bought. Time passed, but the inner battle never stopped. I kept asking myself, what would another man do in my place? Maybe he would have said, just keep paying, stay around at least formally. But I knew that pretending, living in formality, would destroy me from the inside. One night, I remembered the summer of 2023. We took a family trip to Lake Travis. Hannah rode an inflatable boat, laughing so hard, screaming with joy, while I splashed water to keep her from falling. That laughter still echoes in my head, and now here I was, sitting alone in my apartment, staring at my reflection in the window, asking myself, did I do the right thing? Or was I just saving myself from pain? I realized the consequences of my choice weren't just about Hannah. They were about me. Every trip to Safeway, every stop at Whole Foods on Lamar Boulevard, I'd see families with kids, hear their laughter, and feel the weight of my own emptiness. That if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember this. The consequences don't just affect the ones you love. They live inside you too. In October 2024, I stumbled upon Hannah's Instagram profile. She was almost a teenager now. New friends, gymnastics classes on Anderson Lane, school plays at Westlake High. That I watched her grow up without me, and the feeling of loss was almost physical. That I tried reaching out to Emily. Her replies were short, cold, almost like she was afraid I'd interfere again. I felt like any step I made could break her world. Then just a couple weeks ago I got another letter. This time a real one, handwritten with a USPS stamp. It said, "Dear Michael, why did you leave? I thought you'd always be my dad." I held that letter in my hands and realized, no child support, no legal arrangement, nothing could ever replace what we had. I sat on my couch, staring at her words, and asked myself, did I make the right choice? Or did I betray her? That emptiness felt endless. I couldn't even look at Instagram photos anymore without pain. Every picture was a reminder of a bond I'd built for years, and lost. And you know what, friends? There are some things you can't fix. Well, trust. A child's faith in you as their parent. All of it can shatter with one wrong decision. Now I understand, the consequences aren't just what Hannah feels. They're what I carry inside, every day with every breath. Sometimes the choice that seems right in your head leaves a wound in your heart. A wound that will never heal, but teaches you to be honest with yourself, and to accept that every choice comes with a price. That I still ask myself, what would I have done differently? What could I have said to stay without losing myself? But it's too late. All that's left are memories, letters, and photographs. And sometimes walking through the streets of Austin, I see kids smiling at their parents, and I think, maybe they don't realize yet how quickly life can change, how easy it is to lose someone you love. Now, more than 2 years after the divorce, I often sit on the balcony of my apartment and watch the sunset over Austin. Everything around me feels familiar and calm, but inside, there's still a storm. I keep thinking about Hannah, about how she's growing up without me, and about the choice I made that changed everything. Sometimes I catch myself wondering, maybe I should have at least called, texted, stayed in her life, not as her dad, but simply as someone who's always there. But every time I think that, I realize, any attempt to fix the past could destroy both me and her world. And that's the hardest truth. Sometimes the right decision for you personally is not the one others wish you'd make. I've come to understand something. Love for a child doesn't end the moment you sign divorce papers. It either exists, or it never did. Hannah once called me Dad. She trusted me. She laughed with me. And now that bond lives only in the past. I didn't just lose responsibility for her life, I lost a piece of myself. A piece that used to light up at her little victories, her laughter, her drawings. Last fall, I ran into Hannah by chance at Whole Foods on Lamar Boulevard. She was almost a teenager now, carrying a basket, looking grown up and independent. For a moment our eyes met. And I swear I saw that familiar warmth again. But just as quickly she turned away and kept walking. I stood there in the aisle holding my basket, realizing the truth. The bond we built for years would never be the same. I'm not a psychologist, but I know this much. In stories like mine, there's no perfect answer. There's only a choice, and a lifetime of living with it. And sometimes, it's the consequences that teach you the most important lessons. I've learned that you can't live someone else's life. You can't be everything for everyone. Sometimes you have to let people walk their own path, even when it tears your heart apart. So here's my advice for anyone facing something similar. Think twice before stepping away from a child who once called you mom or dad. Because love isn't a contract. It's not about blood. It's a bond that stays in your heart forever. Let me ask you, friends, would you continue to be part of a child's life, a child you see as your own, even if you're no longer legally obligated? I don't know the answer for everyone. But for me, I've realized this. Sometimes it's better to be honest with yourself and accept the pain, than to live inside an illusion. This story isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about how hard it is to make choices when people's hearts are on the line. Every step leaves a mark. Every decision has consequences. I lost my bond with Hannah and I can't bring it back. And that reminds me, every choice we make isn't just about the action itself, but the consequences that follow, consequences we can't erase. So tell me honestly, friends, what would you have done in my place? Would you keep supporting a child who isn't yours by blood, or would you put yourself first? I'm not sharing this to get advice. I'm sharing it to show how impossibly hard some decisions can be. Because love, trust, attachment, they all have a price. And each of us decides what price we're willing to pay. I still remember Hannah's laughter, her little drawings, our trips to Walmart and Dairy Queen, our Sunday drives to Houston to visit her grandma. Those moments will stay with me forever. Because love for a child isn't measured in money or time. It's measured in your heart and in your memories. And even when adults divorce, a child should never lose their sense of family. So if you're listening to this, remember, every choice you make comes with consequences. And sometimes the hardest part of life is accepting that even the right decision still hurts. But that too is part of life, part of who you become.